Phil Mackey, Tom Pelissero here at Soldier Field a couple hours after the Vikings lose 27-13 to the Bears. They fall to 3-6. And let's just start with the game here before we get into the big picture stuff, Tom. Special teams absolutely melted down for the second straight week. The offense started quickly, couldn't get going, and the defense was sort of a mixed bag. And you add it up together, and it's just a bunch of blah, basically.
It's a three-phase failure. I mean, you're at this point in the season, and we've heard all along. Guys are still saying in the locker room after this game, saying, well, you know what, we're 3-6, but now we can still go 10-6. Last I checked, that's a pretty good record. Well, guess what? At this point, they're a bad team. You come out against the Chicago Bears, who really, talent-wise, should be about a 500 team, but they've maximized what they have. Yeah, they have problems. Their offensive line is terrible. The Vikings didn't generate a consistent pass rush. Yes, it was better in the second half, but the defense got put in tough situations, but key breakdowns, allowing a tight end to run the seam with no one anywhere near him, having Ray Edwards fall down on a zone blitz. That's stuff that can't happen. The special teams game, coverage units, you take Jamarcus Sanford off that unit, that's not an excuse for Devin Hester to have that sort of a kick return that he did. He also breaks out on a punt return where 4 or 5 guys got their hands on him. And then offensively, after Favre started 7-7, after that, pretty much fell apart. The receiving core, yeah, you took Bernard Berrian out at the last second, but you've got to be able to put together some sort of offense against this team. There's a lot of factors involved. Bottom line, they played poorly, they deserve to lose. Now they're sitting there at 3-6, and if they lose next week against Green Bay, that's it, bury him.
You know, the question I asked a couple players in the locker room after the game was, where do you go from here? How do you collect yourselves and move forward?
Which we've been asking.
And
we've asked that every game.
It's been the same thing for a month at this point.
Yeah.
And the key phrase was, it's gut check time. But, you know, it's been, like you said, it's been gut check time for the last month. And at some point, you just have to say, if it's been gut check time for a month, and you keep playing like this, maybe this team just doesn't have any guts.
I mean, let's look back at last week. That's a good way of putting it. I mean, you look at last week and you go, all right, the final 4 minutes of regulation plus overtime, that's going to be the jumping off point for the rest of the season. They came out, they played okay in the first quarter today. Favre looked like he was sharp. They had something going offensively. But Chicago was just content to sit back. They were going to play cover 2 all day. They were going to make the Vikings make mistakes. A couple of guys lose their footing on the bad turf. You know, things like that happen. It's just, it's one thing after another. If it's not one thing, it's another. And that's just a sign of, frankly, a bad team.
So how do we analyze the Brad Childress coaching situation right now? I would have to think that they're going to let everything remain status quo, at least through the Green Bay game. If you beat Green Bay, now you're at 4-6, and maybe there's some life. If you lose to Green Bay, the season's already likely over.
They're in trouble. They're in trouble, but you beat Green Bay, potentially that could be a sort of jumping off point. But let's look at the teams that they've beaten this season. They're terrible teams. Mm-hmm. They've beaten Detroit, which today lost to Buffalo, the only team in the league that didn't have a win. They beat Dallas, and Dallas got their coach fired by starting 1-7. They are beating the Giants tonight, but they're a bad team at this point. And they beat Arizona, who then got killed by Seattle today. I mean, you're just talking about the second division. Those are the only teams that they've been able to beat. So do I have any faith that they'll come out and beat the Packers? No, because why would I? Look at, and you can use, you know, the injuries. Yeah, they had guys nicked up today. Look at what the Packers are dealing with. They've lost their starting running back, their starting tight end, I think several starters on defense. You get guys left and right going down. They've found a way just to at least keep themselves around, and that's what you have to do. The Vikings have put themselves in a gigantic hole. They're 3 games back of 2 different teams in the division. This is another NFC loss, which hurts them in the wild card. Yeah, they have 6 of their last 7 are against NFC teams, but if you don't turn around next week, you're at 7 losses. Favre's all beat up. I think he has to at least start thinking about, do I just sit down? Because if you're that guy playing on those sorts of injuries for a team that's going nowhere, I think that he'll play up until mathematical elimination. But you got to 3-7, Favre would at least start having those thoughts, and maybe even the Vikings on some level would start thinking, do we at least need to throw Tavares Jackson there for 6 games and see, has he actually made this progress we think he has?
It's odd. It's the same cast of characters that almost went to the Super Bowl last season. And much like the Cowboys, it's just you're just waiting for the engine to start, and you're waiting for them to kickstart themselves, and it just hasn't happened.
And I still would date it to Favre's decision to arrive late once again, and the drama that created, because at that age, things came together last year. Favre has alluded to that on a number of different occasions, that it's very rare for a team to come together as quickly as the Vikings did last year. They got lucky to an extent. They had a soft schedule early on. They come with a huge win in the 3rd week against San Francisco. The ball started rolling. But at its core, every player knows you need training camp for a reason. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes coming down to training camp. but everybody does it for a reason. What we saw with Favre was through the first 7 weeks of the season, really, he wasn't ready. He was never in sync with his receivers. And also constantly, there have been other factors. The receiving core, the fact that it continues to turn over, and it happened again today. You never see Favre working with the same set of receivers in practice one week as the next, or playing with them in the game and then the next game. It's just, that's been the biggest thing to me is you need that guy to be able to spark your team. He's your highest paid player. He's the one guy, when I did an informal survey in the locker room last week, he's the one guy that everybody named as one of the leaders of the football team. And when he got off to a slow start, that had a trickle-down effect. He committed crucial turnovers in several games. Is he the reason that they lost today? He's a small reason they lost today, but there's a lot of stuff involved. He's played better over the past 3 weeks than he did in the first 6. But at this point, it's starting to look like it's going to be too late.
Well, the telltale sign, or at least the symbolism today, late in the fourth quarter, Vikings trying to put together anything offensively. And on the bench, you had Sidney Rice, Percy Harvin, and Bernard Berrien all sitting next to each other, injured, on the bench as the Vikings season potentially goes down the toilet. Let's go get some deep dish pizza, okay? We're in Chicago.
We got a flight to
catch.
make. Yeah,
we're going to get some deep dish
there.
pizza. He's Tom. I'm Phil. We'll see you.